Okay, we now transition into our next session, which I must say has a lot of the same DNA as the previous session in that it speaks at a very unedited level. And also, I'm very keen by what Roger just said in the previous session about the fact that the damage is not necessarily the crisis of COVID-19. It's actually the response to it. I am thrilled to have with me two speakers who I absolutely love and adore. I can see that they're looking very nervous because they know when I go off script in my introductions, I tend to see if I can make them blush. And we are going to be talking about creating global coalitions readying for recovery. Because as is very clear from the conversation that Roger just shared, that is absolutely essential. And sadly, this is where we as a collective global community have really fallen short, not just in our actions, but in our attitudes to the concept of creating partnerships. So I'm thrilled to have with me two officers and gentlemen of global tourism. And as I said, two very loved friends. I've had the pleasure of sharing many a crisis, many a stage, not the same thing, many an opportunity to spend time together. And these are people I know I can literally, as is required in time of crisis, call in the middle of the night if I need help. And equally, when they have trouble, they're the first people I reach out to just to say, I can't do anything for you right now as we figure it out, but I'm sending prayers. So it is firstly my great joy to welcome to the virtual stage from Nairobi, someone who I'm a little confused because he doesn't have a bow tie on right now. So I think there might be a bit of an identity crisis happening. But it is Honorable Minister Najib Balala, the Cabinet Secretary of Tourism and Wildlife of Kenya. He is a gentleman with an incredible CV. His resume goes back into urban development, into planning across the world. But what I love most is that in addition to being the Honorable Minister of Tourism and Wildlife, he's one of the only leaders in the global tourism sector I've ever seen the industry demand come back. Because this is his second term, and in a country like Kenya that has seen many a challenge, he is a leader who has been turned to with genuine trust, genuine confidence, and genuine conviction that he's going to get people through. Public sector, private sector, whoever it might be, all nationals of Kenya who form part of the magic of Kenya, as well as their big five. He is trusted at so many levels, including that of His Excellency President Kenyatta, who knows he can rely on the Honorable Minister when you need to find the eye of the storm, focus on it, and keep the noise away. He's also, I'm delighted to say, part of my UNWTO family, as he is the chair of the Executive Council, and we are thrilled that he is in that position because of the influence that he has. And he is, again, someone that we know we can rely on. So perfect for this conversation about partnerships and coalitions. Sir, karibu. We also have joining from the States, another very dear friend of mine, the CEO and President of U.S. Travel Association, Mr. Roger Dow. Many of us know him, and he, like the Honorable Minister of Tourism and Wildlife, is a lion when it comes to protecting our sector. He is Washington-based with the umbrella organization that is responsible for representing all segments of the travel industry, for 2.1 trillion US dollars of annual economic input and a profound number of jobs that go right through the value chain. What I love about Roger is that he has been one of the people who has taught leaders in this country to understand what it means to be able to value the tourism industry as a critical part of the economic engine. He is a leader who not only gets it and gets it done with the right impact, he has the ability to quickly get people to get on board. And if they don't, God help them, because they will face the wrath of Roger Dow. So we are thrilled to have him with us alongside Honorable Minister Balala, who has poofed off the screen, but he might have gone off to get a bow tie, I'm not sure. I welcome you both very much. Roger, I'm going to start with you. As we've seen, and we had this conversation earlier in this conference, one of the ironic blessings is not the right word, but blessings of challenge, whether it's 2008, 2009 downturn, now, whatever it might be, it vividly exposes the engineering of the travel and tourism industry and the profound impact it has right across a nation's economy, right through the value chains in terms of employment, investment attraction, GDP generation, and keeping public and private sector working together. If we look at what's happening right now, aviation was identified by your administration right up front as being one of the oh my goodness, we need to get this back in the air again. And you, sir, in the middle of March, had a meeting with His Excellency President Trump and members of the administration to actually be able to put a significant package in place for financial assistance. What, if you were to write your memoirs many, 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 many years from now and look at this chapter, what is the shift in understanding that has genuinely come from your government around why it needs travel and tourism as part of the solution to get the country back on track again when it's safe to open our doors and our skies? Please.
Well, my memoirs, other than being on the show with you, that's the most memorable thing, Anita. But beyond that, looking back at 2008, 2009, that was an across-the-board recession, and people really began to understand the value of travel and tourism. This is different. This is disproportionately hitting travel and tourism. In the United States, if we look at the number of lost jobs, while we represent 3% of the GDP in our country, we're representing 60% of the lost jobs. This is putting travel much more under a spotlight of being so critical to the economy, far more than we saw in 2008, 2009, which put us in the spotlight there. But this is going to really make people understand the link between travel and everything else we do in the world, in our economy.
And it's interesting because if you think of that, based on that understanding now, what is critical is mobilizing that understanding to make sure that, for instance, the stimulus packages that are being planned, that are being mobilized, the money that you've been fighting for, if we know that 80% of the travel and tourism sector is SMEs, how do we make sure that all of that good intention, all of that massive funding actually reaches them? And because they are such fragile entities and being small, reaches them quickly in a way that allows them to keep themselves breathing. Please.
Yeah, the important thing is we were able to get travel and tourism included in a very big way in what is a $2 trillion US dollar stimulus package, approximately about $300 billion going to travel and tourism, $50 billion to the airlines, $250 billion to the other aspects of travel and tourism. You hit the nail on the head. Is the challenge is how to get the money to so many people. It's easy if you had two companies in manufacturing and you get the money right to them. And in travel and tourism, you have thousands and thousands and thousands of businesses. 83% in the US are small businesses. So we're working very hard right now to get the mechanism to get the money to the people. To give you an example, this is going through Small Business Association in the US through the banks. That's the quickest way the Treasury did it. This weekend, Bank of America opened up and in one day had 180,000 applications to handle for a loan. So this is just in one day, 180,000. It's putting us into a situation that we've never seen before of how to funnel a great deal of money and make sure it gets to the right people quickly and not weeks or months when they can't afford to wait.
It's fascinating because we look at that volume, the 180,000, it shows just the incredible level of desperation that exists out there. That's what's quite frightening. And I think that's where, as I mentioned earlier in the summit or in the conference, this being an invisible crisis, it hits people at a primal fear level like never before, not just because of their health, but also their financial health and the safety and stability of their families. Equally, it's invisible. We don't know when it's over. There's a huge question mark. It's not as if we've seen with terror attacks, with natural disasters. There's physical evidence of something happened and recovery. When you look at the challenge ahead, knowing that we've got this massive scale of need, in your mind's eye, how do you prioritize what are the next steps? Because I know that this is something Honorable Minister Balala, who's come back, is going to be asking about in terms of mobilizing, finding the resources and then mobilize them. How do you, as a genuine leader, I believe with incredible instincts, set the next steps forward?
Well, when we were at the White House with the president and the vice president 3 weeks ago, I had a side meeting with the president and I said, we need to start thinking about recovery now, even though we were just in the midst of this beginning in the United States, which he agreed with. So the work that our team is starting to do now is we've got part of our team working on helping get the money to people, actually sharing it. Our businesses, they've never had to go through this before. How do you go about even applying for these funds? So part of our team's working on that. The rest of us are now starting to work on recovery. And the important thing, I think, is to be ready and not be talking recovery too loudly at the wrong time, because we'll come off as tone deaf. What we have to do is understand, watch the signals, watch when things are recovering, watch the cases go down, and then be ready as a unified industry to do something very big. We've got to break through the media that is just 24/7 showing sick people. And we've got to break through that and say it's okay to get on a plane, okay to get on a cruise ship, okay to take a trip.
But you make an interesting point, because like with the world, the States is the same in that it's going to happen in different parts. It's going to happen in different stages. What do you see as a credible, in your own, just your own wisdom, your own understanding, a credible sign of first sparks of recovery?
I can't hear you.
Somewhere. What is in your mind?
I think the credible sign will be when the cases, new cases begin to go down precipitously, which they will. We've seen that in China and other places. And when people begin getting on planes again, it's important for people to get over that fear. Even though the cases may be down, people may still be carrying with them a fear that it may not be safe to get on a plane. I think if I were running the world, I would have all these health experts we could find get on planes, go to ships, go to hotels, and come back and report about what's going on and what they're seeing, and the great effort is being made to keep people safe. Do that first to really eliminate fear. And the other thing, it's not going to happen instantaneously on one day. All of a sudden we're coming back. It's going to go in waves, and it's going to be domestic first, and then slowly move internationally.
It is interesting how the value of domestic tourism has shifted so profoundly, because as you say, it's the confidence of expanding the comfort zone. That's not going to happen just because the airlines are flying again. And so it will be next door, next neighborhood, next country. What I find interesting as well is this crisis has demonstrated, as we talked up front, the value of the travel and tourism sector, which people are now understanding. So they can see, if I travel next door, I can see the value I'm having in making an impact to rebuild my country. So there's also that national pride in being part of the restructuring itself. I'm going to switch now. I can presume, Honorable Minister Balala, you can hear me, correct?
Yes, I can.
Oh,
sorry about that.
Yeah.
What happened?
Brilliant. I must say, this has been quite an interesting exercise as a conference, because it hasn't just moved us into the 21st century of technology, it's yanked us in, whether we were ready or not. Honorable Minister, you made an interesting point in one of our briefing calls that Roger, who's a master at bringing coalitions together across the industry, across the country, has been able to acquire an incredible amount of funding commitment to be able to remobilize the industry. But you had an interesting question about what do you do in developing parts of the world where the countries don't have that funds on the side ready for mobilization? Do you want to pose a specific question to Roger in that regard?
Yes, thank you very much, and sorry for all these technical hitches, but here we are. Thank you, Roger. Yes, the bigger question is that Africa, for example, cannot be like the US, where you have $2 trillion available for the industry or for the stimulus packages. We struggle here. We have budget cuts and also tax relief, but also it eats on your budget and your debt. It's easy to give the stimulus packages, but then the debt is going to be bigger and need to be addressed in 1 or 2 years' time or 10 years' time. How do you address that? But I think this is the time where the globalized institutions like IMF, World Bank should come in and say, okay, we have a challenge in Africa. Is there any date waiver for Africa? I've just been told per year date repayment is about $44 billion from Africa to the international community. So if you have $44 billion compared to $2 trillion, is a fraction of a figure. But how do we help there? Maybe Roger, you can help us. That how do government helps from colleagues or from the global institutions without going into this big debt after the crisis?
Great question.
Yeah, Najib, I think one of the most important things the government can do is really help with communications. Right now in the United States, communications is all about steps that the people should be taking on social distancing and all the right things to do. But the next thing that government can do that can be even more helpful than money is to begin helping us communicate that it is time to travel, safe to travel, help getting the business back. So that won't require as much money. I'm looking at the U.S. If we could, this is my wish list, get $1 billion compared to $2 trillion, but $1 billion will go a phenomenal way. And then the industry can take care of itself. But I think the role the government can play is really help in communicating. It is the ability to travel and getting people back and take that role on versus where you're not in a situation where you have enough the money that you would like to dole out. But the whole communications process, I think, is going to be the most important role the government can play.
And it's very similar to what you did after the 2008-2009 crisis about remobilizing the need to travel, being messaged at a government level, but also saying why people need to travel for business, why it's healthy to take those holiday leaves, and how you really repositioned it well. Honorable Minister Balala, you live in a country that really gets tourism. They understand it. They understand how it's part of the fabric of the economy itself. And on March 27th, you had some, as you said, some significant tax cuts communicated by His Excellency President Kenyatta. We were talking earlier about the measures and being able to make them get down to the local SME level itself. What do you see now that those systems have been put in place is your next challenge to be able to ensure that the benefactors are receiving the benefits themselves? Please.
Well, first of all, we need to address the issue of now. What is happening now? Now it's a crisis we don't know about tomorrow. Yeah, you've seen what happened to Boris Johnson. You don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. God forbids, we need to get a situation where there's stability. But at the moment, you cannot even know what's going to happen tomorrow. It's evolving. But again, so what we do here is how do we save lives? How do we stop the spread? So that is the priority, should be for every government and society as well. So that's exactly what we did. The president in Kenya gave the tax relief, yes, but is yet to trickle in because all those tax relief depends on your salary, depends on your income. And currently there is no income. So it will reach eventually, but there's no income. So what's happening now with the lockdown? We've just got a partial lockdown yesterday. It started in Nairobi. There's a lockdown out of the city. You cannot go out of the city. Same thing with the part of the coastal region from tomorrow. There'll be no traveling within the inter-counties. So there is technically a partial lockdown of the big cities. Why? Because to stop the spread of the virus. But then what happened to the people? How do we save the situation that people have access to food? So the government in Kenya has said food transport is allowed. So we do a partial and a clever way of a lockdown. So there is no paralysis of people suffering and then going on hunger or getting even more sicker. Indeed. So those are the issues that we take now. But definitely there'll be a time in the next 3 months where things have not happened yet. And my projection is that despite we have allocated $5 million for post-corona campaign and recovery, it will take much longer until we stabilize so that we can do a post-corona strategy. But now currently is how do we handle the situation now? And my projection again, up to November, we'll have very little tourism coming, not only in Kenya, but in Africa from overseas. Why? Because not only tourism is down, but also the airline to start again is a big deal. So our interconnectivity with airlines is huge, because if we have one frequency coming to Nairobi every week, the numbers are going to be low. Until we go back to the daily frequencies and double frequencies in a day, then the numbers will start coming up. But at the moment, it will take some time until we revive the aviation industry at the same time so that tourism can be revived.
And it's interesting you say that, and that's where it provides a different context because of the fact that, as you say, you've got one part of the world where the funds are there, but more importantly, the infrastructure is there. Whereas whether it was in South Africa with His Excellency President Ramaphosa putting the lockdown in place, or in Kenya, water to wash one's hands and social distancing are luxuries on a daily basis. It's a very different scenario. I have a question coming in from Jonathan, who is saying, the question being, the key to this crisis is that we all start realizing that 90% of us are immune to this virus. The future is surely immunity, are not immune to the virus. It's surely immunity for all of us, so that people can return to travel and to identify and protect those who are, sorry, I think I'm reading this. Jonathan, do you want to pop up? Because I think I'm reading your question incorrectly. I think the point being that there's going to be a high degree of immunity. Oh, sorry, it was not Jonathan's question. Someone else typed in, basically saying that some people will go through this crisis and will have developed an immunity, others not. How do we then expect travel to be able to get some sense of normality when there's still that invisible fear of who still might carry it, especially asymptomatically, and who does not? Do either of you have a point of view on that?
Well, I think that's going to be one of the big factors, is people believing that things are safe. When we have a vaccine, that is going to be very important. There's a very French scientist here where I live in St. Petersburg, Florida, who's developed a pill that makes people immune to it. Now, the question is how quickly that can get to people, because it's so important. And so many breakthroughs. I think we're going to look back on this and find out we have a safer world, because so many times pandemics were in smaller areas of the world. This is so different. This is the entire world. And you're going to have every scientist in the world focusing on how do we deal with this in the future. And there will be preventatives, there will be prophylactic pills and things like that. And it's going to be very important that the public feels that there is that safety. No one worries about, for instance, the flu, because they know there's flu vaccines. If they get it, they can quickly be dealt with. And this has to happen, the same thing with this. And I think we're going to find ourselves in a much better world next year and the year following because of this. It's a sad way to have to go through it, but I think it's woken the world up to how connected we are to each other's lives.
You make a great point, because whether it's sustainability or the issue of COVID-19, no one can own it. Everyone is impacted by it, but no one can own it. Honorable Minister, I want to shift to you quickly before we start wrapping up, in terms of, we're very blessed to have you on the Global Crisis Coalition that's been set up by the UNWTO, with the WHO, with ICAO, with the World Bank. And you've had some initial conversations about, in the spirit of collaboration, how do we exactly, to Roger's point, move forward on this? Is there anything you can share with us from that perspective in terms of the benefit, especially having the WHO as really the only qualified voice of stop or go right now? Please.
Well, thank you very much, Anita. The most important thing is that the coalitions are coming together in harmony. For example, ICAO, IMO, in terms of maritime and tourism coming together. How do we harmonize? Because without each other, we cannot survive. So without airlines, we can't survive. Without maritime, in terms of cruise ships, we can't survive. So we need that harmony to come in. And it's brilliant. The UNWTO Secretary General has brought in this to bring us together, and they took the lead. Yeah. And I participated in this conversation. How do we take the lead? And let's be optimistic, despite it is gloomy, but how do we move forward for tomorrow? Because there is tomorrow going to come. So we need to address now what is up. My point here is that there'll be a new normalcy, a new normal. That new normal is what? Maybe all the mistakes we have done or did not do them right in tourism, we need to do them right now in terms of climate change, in terms of sustainability, in terms of over-tourism. These are things that need to be done now. And yes, some of the operators will survive, will be immune, and will just move on and be stronger. Some of the operators will die or will not work, yeah, or will not survive with this crisis. So how do we mitigate so that we don't have the damage to be bigger?
Indeed.
Because we need to balance. We need to balance, despite we are going to move to a new dispensation of a new world order. So these are the challenges we need to think down. And probably these 2-3 months where people are locked down, these people cannot move. How do we think the new tourism? The new tourism that put people first, that put environment first, and that actually benefits local communities.
Indeed. And
so yes, as the UNWTO once said, that you can't build 5-star hotels in 3-star communities. How do we make sure that communities are part of that success and that investment?
And by nation, SMEs as well, and smaller businesses being part of the collective. As we pull this together, as my clock's about to start clicking in terms of timing out, just a couple of things. You said something really important about the need that when it comes to those alliances, who's taking the lead? What I find fascinating, and this is where, Roger, you've been really interesting about, the leadership position will change at different stages. Right now, the lead is the WHO. This is a global issue of humanity and health, and those of us not in the medical community need to stay out of the way and stay out of trouble so that the medical people can do what they need to. And then we can get into recovery mechanisms themselves. To you both, as a bit of a closure, what have you learned when it comes to creating these coalitions and creating these partnerships to really critically deal with crisis, recovery, response, rebuilding, rehoping? What should you not do? What are some of the principles of these coalitions? Be very careful not to, Roger.
I think be very careful not to be Pollyanna and say, as we heard many voices say, this is not a problem. It's just like the flu. It will pass. I think we've got to take things very seriously, as you mentioned, from a health standpoint, but then we have to step out from a business and travel standpoint. The minister mentioned over-tourism. I guarantee you there are people in Spain, in Iceland, in Venice who are not worried about over-tourism today. And I think what we need to do is let's demonstrate the value of tourism, and we now have to be responsible in what we do in tourism because the people are going to want the tourists back, and it wasn't going that way 6 months ago.
Indeed. It's a great point, because I always think that, please God, may we not look back at this time and think, I wish we'd done that. Now is the time to have the conversations about re-engineering in a way that really is healthy at an economy level, social, cultural, environmental, and at a spiritual level. Honorable Minister Balala, what have you learned about be very careful?
Thank you very much. First of all, this COVID-19 is real, so we cannot deny it, but we have also different measures to overcome it. Every country and every society have a unique situation. How do we overcome? And we will also overcome it at different times. We will not, like you see, Wuhan now is coming back while other countries are just shutting down. So this is reality. How do we move on? And everybody should learn lessons. We should learn from China. We should learn from our neighbors. Everybody can actually share lessons with each other.
Indeed.
So it's not that it is just my way or the highway, or this jacket has to be fitting me and fitting everybody else. No, but these are the reality of life. Unfortunately, it has happened. But this is a time, I believe, also we can, when we overcome it considering all the challenges that we did not do them before, we can correct them.
Indeed,
now.
and we make sure that as we overcome it, we bring others with us to accelerate their ability.
Yeah.
And this is why I find fascinating how language has been changed because of this crisis. The word community is no longer just digital. We actually care about the people living next to us. That's going to have an impact on how our society rebuilds, not just tourism. The word essential, many of us are finding we're not actually on that essential list. It's other people. It's the teachers, the doctors, the stockists, the delivery people. Those are the people that are essential to really keep communities and societies healthy. And it's taught us honesty, it's taught us humility, and oh my goodness, it's teaching us patience. And with that, I would just like to say to you both, please stay well, stay strong, keep your hands clean, and know how incredibly grateful we are that you've joined us. Roger, I know you probably have your PJ bottoms on right now because we pulled you out of bed on this. But thank you for what you brought to this conversation, because this is where the future starts, with these conversations. So loving Asante Sana, thank you very much, sir. We're very grateful. I will now hand back to Jonathan to take the stage. Lovely.